Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast number 4 of Stop Being Invisible in the new format on YouTube. Very happy that we have this new format. We can reach so many people this way. And our efforts are working, Dr. Lane, it seems like.
Dr. Ingrid, we have some really good news to share with our listeners. I mean,
Right?
we're probably at like 1,200 for each of our first three podcasts, 1,200
Uh-huh.
listeners, which is fabulous. But on an even better note, our efforts are working with the representatives and the state senators. We're actually seen on the TV, and I'm hearing from a lot of my contacts that they're holding town hall meetings.
Yeah.
So I think the our asking people to contact their congressmen and their senators, and also our advocacy is working.
Hmm.
We need to know that our actions are being followed, they're being heard, and we deserve to have answers to our questions.
I've been to three
Oh,
meetings last week, Dr. Lane. Just 1 week, 3 meetings, and I missed the fourth. I
wow,
was
yeah,
working.
yeah, and I mean our senators and congressmen had a town meeting last Monday. So
Right.
I mean it is having an impact, and like I said, we're seeing it on TV all the time. Where that some of the meetings aren't going too well for some of the congressmen and representatives.
Yes.
So,
But
but
that's okay because you know what? They're going okay for the people. I feel like when the
right,
people show up and they are able to articulate what they need, what the community needs, it goes well for people. So
right.
that's really good news. That's really good news. It's a great way to start our podcast number 4. So what we want to tell you is that our efforts in calling, writing to our Congress people, to our senators, it's really working. To even our local officials, like we said last time, everything is local. So we want to emphasize that if you need to call your governor, your AG, your attorney general, anyone in your community, and when we go really really local, we know we can't see you, Dr. Lane. You have to. Now we see you.
Oh,
Now
sure.
we see you. Um, so when we go like super local, those people are our neighbors. I know one of my trustees in my neighborhood, he's actually my neighbor. He lives around the corner from me. So imagine that, right? So when we make our needs known, they listen.
Because
Definitely.
they know us, and it's
Yes,
like,
they
okay,
know.
if they have a concern, I need to be concerned about it also.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm hearing from a lot of people about the cuts in, Social Security and the Medicaid and Medicare. They're being either eliminated or reduced, and I mean, we're concerned and confused about what the security of these programs are. And that's a real worry for people because we've got to, um, as an individual myself with a disability, I know that life can be very mysterious, you know,
Yeah.
particular, undaunting, and but we still have to carry on no matter what is going to happen or may happen. We're just in a quandary, and we kind of have to deal with these things all the time. And Dr. Ingrid, I know in your case, if you'd like to speak to some of the problems you're, you know, hearing about with your brother, or your mom's having concerning your brother.
Of course. Where do I start, right? For people who know my life story, and I've said it many times on this channel. I mean, I've been very open about it everywhere. I first got into this field because of my youngest brother. So my youngest brother is now an adult in his 40s, and he's an adult with disabilities. He has an intellectual disability, and it's developmental, which means he's had this since he was a child. Most like he was born like that. He was diagnosed when he was very little. I remember all his struggles growing up. But more than anything, I do remember a time, and I know you remember this too, Dr. Lane, before services were available. And my parents had to pay for everything, either if insurance didn't pay. And now I guess, when you were a kid, insurance probably didn't even pay for anything. But when I was growing up, some insurance would pay, some didn't, and it was nobody came to your home to provide any service. If they did, you had to pay for that. It was I remember my family struggle very vividly. And this is the reason why I got into this field. I got into this field because I wanted to minimize the struggle for other people. And I wanted to fight for other people. I wanted not only to fight for my family, for my brother, but I understood what it meant um, to have someone with disabilities in your family or to have a disability yourself. I understood that firsthand. And I have to tell you, Medicaid, well, first of all, Department of Education Law 94-142, we always talk about
We'll
that
talk
because
about that.
94-142 is the most amazing piece of legislation besides the ADA, the American with Disabilities Act, in the field of disabilities. So, if we're not talking about this, then we're talking about Medicaid. Medicaid is the other portion of this. So Medicaid provides, because when people think about Medicaid, they don't understand what Medicaid really means. Medicaid provides for basically most of all or all services for very young children under age 3, and they provide for basically all services for people over 21 or 22 in New York State, right? Um, My brother, without Medicaid, would not be able to have therapy. He would not be able to attend the day treatment program. He wouldn't be able to access the services of someone who could help my mother with the daily living tasks. It would be all up to me, all up to my mother. And needless to say, my mother and my father unfortunately passed away a few years ago. So I remember him saying this, Dr. Lane. I know it's going to sound very sad, but he said it because you can understand this because you've dealt with this yourself and you've dealt with families. But he would say, I prefer to die a day after Fernando, my brother, because it was so hard for him to know that he was going to die without not knowing what's going to happen to him.
Where the
Like the
support was
best
coming from, right? Yeah.
because it's very difficult to find like living situations for people who depend, right? Like they need group homes or they need like some kind of a assisted living situation. Medicaid pays for all that. Medicaid pays for all the services that they get. Um, so for him, I got a Medicaid. This is a very personal story. Would be extremely detrimental to his quality of life. Needless to say, not just his, but
Right.
mine, my mother, my entire family. Um, you know, I wouldn't be able to I wouldn't be able to be a contributing taxpayer in society because I'm able to work because he's able to attend a program because he has supports because my mother has help. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to contribute to society. I would have to be with him and, taking care of him and, making sure that everything's taken care of for him. So that's my personal story. And this is why, for people with disabilities, Medicaid is so fundamental. And just to give you one statistic, one in every 33 children that are born today in the United States is born with autism or will develop or will have autism, will be diagnosed with autism, I should say. Because autism is a developmental disability. So usually you get diagnosed when you're a child under the age of 18. So just to put that in perspective, just think about how many people will need services through Medicaid. So just to think of all these potential cuts to Medicaid, I don't know if we should go into detail now as to there's so much to talk about, Dr. Lane.
There is, and you're talking about the millions that will be impacted because of the autism diagnosis, but there are other diagnoses also
Yeah.
in special education, and we're not even talking
No,
about those numbers.
no.
So I mean, yeah, and
My brother is intellectually disabled, so he's not even within that, that diagnosis, but let's just, there's people who have physical impairments, right? Depend on Medicaid to be a contributing member of society. There's people who have sensory impairments. There's people who have behavioral impairments, have mental health issues. You name it. There's just so many different categories, right? And one of the things that we want to explain to people, I guess, because I know there was a lot of confusion, Dr. Lane. I was talking to someone whom I love, family member, this week, and she was pretty much guaranteeing that the president is not going to cut Medicaid. And I know that's what a lot of people feel. And that's okay. I mean, if you feel like that and you think that the president is not going to do it, I'm going to tell you what actually happened this week. So this week there was the resolution, right? So what a resolution basically means is that basically Congress is looking at the budget and trying to see where they can. There was a reconciliation, right? They call it.
Right.
They,
Yes.
they reconcile the the um, the budget, right? Reconciliation because they're looking at little things in the budget here and there where they can cut, when they could, add or cut. Basically, what they were trying to do is cut because they're trying to cut the deficit. We do have a deficit, right, in this country because we spend more than what we bring in. Basically, what we bring in is in taxes, and we spend more.
I
So
think it's around $36 trillion.
something like that. But I
Yeah.
think so that's what we spend, and what we bring in is like we're short like a couple of like a couple of trillion. No, I think maybe I want to say 20. I don't know, but I
Yeah,
maybe,
I
but
know
we're
it didn't even come
definitely
close to
not
what we
bringing
bring in
in.
to what we owe. Right.
So
Yeah.
we all recognize the need for this. That is not part of what we're talking about. What we're saying is, in order to do this, Congress decided that they were going to cut. So this was the reconciliation. They said, okay, so here's all the department, all the different committees, and here's what we're cutting from each committee. So the committee that deals with Medicaid, which is Energy and Commerce, I believe, they got an $880 billion kind of like, look where you can cut this from. But basically, the only place where they can really cut is Medicaid. So we know that all these cuts are going to be coming from Medicaid. So this is what happened. You can say, well, no, nothing's happened yet. And that would be true. Nothing has happened yet because we're only in this process where this happened Friday or Thursday. I can't remember. And my days
Friday.
are like a blur because
Yes.
everything happens. But that went back to committee. The Senate worked on a similar version. So what happens is the committees now come out with the resolution like, okay, here's where we're cutting from. And I read, like all the different items, and I can tell you
Mhm.
it's 95% Medicaid. So they're gonna come from Medicaid. A big, big portion of that is people with disabilities, because people with disabilities rely on Medicaid. So there's a lot of funding that goes to that. So now that comes back to the House. It goes to a vote. The Senate votes. They have to match it up somehow. The Senate and the House, and then once they pass it, that's it. It gets signed into law, I guess. Some people are saying, well, President Trump doesn't want to cut Medicaid. So I mean, I hope that's what it is. But from what I understand, I don't know if Dr. Lane you heard the same, but there were some Congress people that were holdouts, and I believe that they were promised they were made certain promises, but if they voted for it, they
They, they were influenced.
they were
Yes.
influenced, let's just say, by the executive branch.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure how that would work, because they basically voted yes, trusting that
They're going to get. Hmm.
yeah, so I don't understand. I don't so it's either, the president's changing his mind, or I am not sure exactly how that will work, but we know that as of right now, this is where it stands, and $880 billion were sent to committee to be cut from vital services, from mostly Medicaid, because that's where the money is. Um, so as we always
And,
tell you,
right. Yeah. And Dr. Ingrid, think about who that's going to impact.
as
The underserved,
yeah.
the people with disabilities, and the people in the rural communities.
Oh, most of
The
all,
people
I
who live,
think.
yeah, the people who live paycheck to paycheck, they're the ones that are going to have these problems, as you've been saying. They're the ones that are going to have these problems thrown on them, even if they don't even have disabilities. If their state isn't going to provide
Yeah.
that money, I know that I think I heard again, like you, my days of just, you know, I
A
got up yesterday
blur.
and yeah, I'm like, I can't even believe today's Saturday already. What happened?
Yeah.
Where did Monday through Friday go?
Sunday,
But I
Dr.
mean,
Lane.
yeah, it's like, and it's our representatives and Congress people here in Delaware. They're like, okay, we're going to have this big cut to our budget. Where are we going to get the money from?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's there, so it's impacting every single state there that's already out there. Like we know these cuts are coming. How are we going to be able to support them? How are we going to, to provide them for the people that need them?
Similarly
So,
here in New York, because most of the hospitals that rely on
right,
Medicaid, because the hospitals, they, even though they always, Medicaid doesn't pay enough, but at the very least it helps them survive, right? And most of them are in rural areas, and people who live paycheck to paycheck are the ones who rely the most on Medicaid. I mean, we always tell you, call your Congress people. If like me, I mean, if you live in Long Island, I can tell you, the Congressman Swatsy and Congresswoman Gillen voted against this because they can foresee how detrimental this will be to our community. But there's a couple of other congressmen, to be exact, Congressman Laloda and Congressman Garbarino. They voted. They voted. Sorry, I'm gonna backtrack. So, Congresswoman Gillen and Congressman Swatsy voted against this reconciliation, but the other two, Laloda and Garbarino, voted yes, meaning yes, they agree with all of these cuts to Medicaid, and all these other programs. So call them. Call them up. If you're like me and you live on Long Island, call them up. Tell them, if you, and I know, like in Suffolk County, for example, here on Long Island, the wait lists are even longer for children who are waiting for services. And when we're talking about wait list, we have wait list, anything that depends on Medicaid. We have a wait list all the time, but we have wait list, anything that depends on Medicaid, because the reimbursements are already kind of small. And so now with the reduction, it's going to be even worse. And I know this happened before. So for people who say that's not going to happen, let me tell you,
right.
this happened before. I got a pay cut about, I want to say 15 years ago or so. We got a pay cut through Medicaid. We had just gotten a raise, and then they're like, sorry,
Well, it's going. Yeah.
can't pay you that much. You need to get a pay cut. And so it's not unheard of that that this will happen again, that we will get another pay cut. There are already a lot of therapists that I know, Dr. Lane, that are already going into private practice because of the reimbursement.
Right.
And a lot of people like me, that we work from dawn to dusk, because we want to make sure that people who need their services get their services, but we don't know how much we'll be able to stay in the business, because we, like you, have bills to pay as well. We have mortgages. We have, we need to keep our lights on.
Right.
Um, and as you said, Dr. Lane, it's not going to impact, you know,
the billionaires
Those
and
people
right.
who are well off because they are the ones who are paying private practice.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's the actions this administration are taking are just reckless and thoughtless. I mean, I don't think they're thinking like, okay, let's just cut the money from here, but how it's going to impact the people that are receiving these cuts and the
Yeah.
services that are going to be stopped because these services are not being provided. And I mean, talking to the people at the Department of Education, I mean, they
Yeah.
just say it's in complete chaos. I mean, people aren't going to want to go into education anymore just because of how services aren't going to be provided. We're not, there could be the cut in paraprofessionals that we talked about, the classroom helpers, and it's just like, and we need people in education
More than ever.
more than ever, and to continue on with the tradition of educating our population.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, that's just necessary.
Yeah. And don't we already have a shortage in we've had for quite a few years a shortage in special educators. We have a
Right.
shortage in some of the subject areas, but special education is one of them. We've had this shortage, and without supports, because Medicaid does supply for a lot of the supports in special education, we are going to continue to have this shortage. I just don't see how this is going to get any better. So
Yeah.
yeah, so this is how Medicaid impacts your lives. And like we say, Medicaid, we always talk about people with disabilities, and we talk about people with disabilities and their families. And because this is with Dr. Lena now, we've been doing this for many, many
Many,
years.
we'll just say many, many years. Yes, we'll leave it there.
But what we always say is this also impacts everyone else. This doesn't just impact people with disabilities. And when we're talking about Medicaid, I mean, I think in New York, the statistics is as follows. Let me just see if I can quote some numbers. Um, okay, 53% of newborns, yeah, in New York rely on Medicaid. So imagine if your child is in the NICU
Right.
and you get cut. 43% of children, children of any age, they rely on Medicaid. 72% of patients in nursing homes. So we're not talking about, this is not people with disabilities. This is everyone else. This is Medicaid in general. And so, um, Medicaid cuts will impact everybody, not just by the lack of services for children with disabilities, but just everybody. And just to say one more thing, you know, the early intervention program, which is provided everywhere in the country because it's part of our favorite special education law, PL 94-142. Uh,
We're too right.
Part C, correct.
Our readers should know that, or our listeners should know that by heart
You
now.
know
You know,
that by
so
heart at this moment. Um, those children are children that are deemed at risk. So you don't have to be born with a disability. You
right.
could have been in the NICU, or you could have been maybe your doctor says, your pediatrician says, your child is 2 years old, and your child says 10 words when they should be saying over 50 and putting them together in a phrase. Or maybe your child is not jumping when they should, or not running where they should
Mhm.
when they should. Or maybe they are not focusing enough. So we consider, these milestones, very important milestones. And if you're not meeting those milestones, we say this child is at risk, and you are eligible. It's not like your doctor says and you're eligible. There is a process by which there's a determination of eligibility. So once it's determined that you're eligible for these services, um, they get provided to you. That that whole thing has a wait list at this moment. A lot of kids wait for months, 2 months, 3 months. I've had patients that waited for 3, 4, 5, 6 months to get a speech therapist. I've had children that went without OT, for example, um, PT. When I say OT is occupational therapist, PT is physical therapist. There are children that go without because there aren't enough providers because the reimbursements aren't that great. Um, and it's difficult. It's hard to be a provider for children with disabilities. It's very or children at risk. It's very difficult. So those people go into private practice.
And,
Uh,
and it goes back to, the bigger cities are going to have those people. The rural areas are not. You know,
Correct.
the underprivileged parents aren't going to have that. The grandparents aren't going to have those services if they live in the rural areas.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a client in a rural area of a big city in a southern state, and they literally just told the parent, "We don't provide that service here."
Wow.
Yeah,
Even though the
and
child was recommended?
even though the child was recommended, we don't provide that service, here. And when we went to mediation, the mediator said, "No, the district has to provide it." The district
Of
went and got
course.
attorneys, and we could not get an attorney to represent us because they didn't want to go against the district. So,
Interesting. This
so
is
it was.
where, yeah, this is where your calls to your representatives are very, very important.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, is like, we talk about government efficiency. I mean, I know we're all in favor of, cutting the fat, cutting the waste, doing away with unnecessary people. But we're I just turned on the when I came on for the podcast, the headlines were, round two of what did you do at work this week has
Right.
started. The email went out, and it's, causing total chaos.
Right.
List your accomplishments for this week. And so they're going to have to do another. So how can people be efficient if they're trying to answer these questions while they're trying to do their job? And it's
And
yeah,
what they're saying is it's hard to keep a train of thought. Like it's
right,
hard to
yeah,
concentrate when you're under so much stress.
right,
I heard someone say, I think maybe that's what they're trying to do, like trying to make it very difficult, for us to work in this type of environment so that we quit.
right,
But
yes. Or they
and
make
then there
sure you
was
mess up, and then they have a reason to fire you.
yeah, right, right. And you're gonna get believe me, I dealt with workplace stress. I've spoken a lot about it. Um So basically, what it is they start bullying you, harassing you, and then it gets in your head, and then you start becoming the person they're telling you are, because of all this distraction. There was another piece of news that we wanted to talk about, which is the situation with health
Oh,
and the
yes.
health department, the new health department that's headed by Secretary Kennedy.
Yes, they released a statement on Friday prohibiting public comments during his department's rulemaking process, uh, ending more than 50 years of public involvement in crafting this department's rules. Uh, Lawrence uh, Gostin of the University Law Center stated that this move by Kennedy is a clear effort to avoid accountability.
Hmm.
And we're talking about holding people to accountability. What are you doing? Are you breathing, or are you doing your job? And it's more
Right.
like, is it really an efficiency check, or is it just a welfare check? I mean, the police do welfare checks all the time. Are people still, alive at their house? In fact, had there been a welfare check on a famous actor who just recently
Oh
died,
yeah.
this wouldn't have happened. But I mean, that's not what government is involved
It's
in, is
not what
checking
they're
to see if
doing.
people are alive or not. I mean, it's like, if they're doing their job, they're doing their job. That's sufficiency, not what did you do, or, we're just checking to see if you're breathing or not. So send us a message, like, yeah.
And I know we have to start wrapping up soon, but when we talked about this, our concern, well, there was a couple of concerns. One of them is that we know A lot of people with disabilities have a bunch of comorbidities, so they depend on a very reputable, um, you know, health system
Right.
to take care of them. Well, let's just say, well, we just talked about Medicaid. Now we have this issue. And one thing I just want to say, I know there's a lot of talk of over the years, and me dealing with families, especially families of children who were recently diagnosed to be on the spectrum. There's a huge misconception that vaccines cause autism. We don't know what causes autism, okay? We just don't know. Do we know that there is an increase? Absolutely. Undeniable. There's an increase in the diagnosis of autism. Part of it is because now the DSM recognizes autism, where before the DSM is the manual for um, mental health,
Yeah. Thanks.
mental health manual. Um, and so everybody in the psychology, special education, psychiatry, like everybody uses the same
Rules. The
parameters,
same right.
right?
Hmm.
To diagnose. And so the DSM definition was redefined to include more people who were previously not included. So obviously it's going to explode. However, it doesn't explain everything. So I get that. I understand. But if anything, vaccines have been made safer over the years. A lot
Hmm.
of the things that were thought to be more detrimental have been removed from vaccines. So, like, please vaccinate your children. We don't know. We don't know what causes autism. I wish I could tell you. Um, but correlation is not a causation. I always talk about the incidence of drowning. you know Ice cream
Hmm.
sales go up, and drowning, the death by drowning, and the incidence of death by drowning really goes up too
Sure.
when ice cream sales go up. Does the ice
Cause.
cream sale
Right.
cause drowning?
Right.
No.
Hmm.
But
Right.
summer is the intervening variable. Not that summer causes it either.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Summer does not cause people to drown either, but it's the intervening variable. When summer starts, ice cream sales
Rather
go
true.
up. When it gets hotter, people go to the pool a lot more. Therefore, you're going to see more people drowning than in other times of the year. So it's the intervening variable. Do we know what intervening variable is there? No, we don't know. We just know because we tend to diagnose children around the same age that we give vaccines. It just happens to be that we wait, until a certain point to kind of be sure, because we don't want to, diagnose people unnecessarily. We don't want to cause panic. So sun is really strong here, Dr. We don't want to cause a panic. So we wait around that time and we diagnose when it's actually necessary to do that. And it happens to be around the time that kids get all of their vaccines, and therefore,
Hmm.
increase in
Vaccines are
vaccines,
related.
increase in autism. But there's no cause. There's no cause. It's just a correlation. So I can't think of any other good ones, but that's one that I want you
It's
to
a very good
remember.
example, right? Hmm.
Yes. And please, Secretary Kennedy, please hold that meeting in terms of the flu vaccine. Some of us that work with children year round rely on the vaccine to
Right.
try to avoid getting sick. I'm not saying that, I know the flu vaccine is not the greatest. I get it. Sometimes it's a 20% um, uh, what do you call it? Effectiveness, right?
Right. Yes. Hmm.
Um, but I'll take it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, 20% is
It's
better
just
than
a
nothing.
pinch,
Right.
and
Yes.
I do it every year, and
I do too.
it's helped me tremendously. I can't tell you how many times I get a call. Hey, I know you were with Johnny yesterday. I want to
Right.
let you know that he had a fever overnight and he was just
I have
diagnosed
to.
with the
Yep.
flu.
Yeah.
And thank goodness I was protected and I didn't get it. I can't tell you how many times that happens. When you work with children, it's very, very common. So I know we have to wrap this up. Dr. Lane, any final thoughts to our audience before we let them go?
No, I think we got to go back to our first, how we started this. There's good news. The representative and Congress people are actually hearing our calls to them to do something, to meet with us, to hear our concerns, and I would just encourage everybody to keep their the phone calls going, and the phone numbers are right in the probably they can find them right online.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't have to be a letter. It's just here's a call, and you just call and
And
give them
if
your number, and
and
it's
if
like,
you're
okay,
shy, I have a thing. If you're shy, because I know people who are shy, and I tell them call them when they have a machine.
right there you go, call them at night, right? Like
Call at night, leave a message. If you're shy, you don't want to talk, and I can guarantee you, the staffers are great. I've spoken to staffers;
I
they're
have to.
great. Okay, whether it's for or against, always take your complaints. I want to say your concerns seriously. They always do, no matter which side you're on. I've called both. So talk to the staffers, talk to them. But if you're shy, call at night, leave a message. They do always get it because I've gotten callbacks.
Well, good. That's great. I would
You
say,
don't want them to call you back, you say it.
right,
But if you want to call back, you say it too. I've gotten callbacks, and I have nothing but good things to say about calling my representatives. So do
I've
that.
been very
I
pleased.
encourage you to be part of the solution.
Right. Yes. And we'll see
Yes.
everybody next week.
See everybody next week. Have a wonderful rest of your week, everyone.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.